I'd been planning Kate's birthday for months, maybe longer. Honestly, I'd started sketching ideas the day after her last one. She teased me for being obsessed with making up for lost time. But I meant it. We'd had a rough stretch, and I wanted this night to be a kind of reset button. A grand gesture. Something unforgettable for all the right reasons. That's how I found myself standing in the middle of one of the most expensive nightclubs in Miami Beach, watching the staff set up for the biggest party I'd ever thrown. The place was pure excess. Velvet ropes, mirrored walls, a stage big enough to host a rock band, and lighting so dramatic it could make anyone look like they belonged on the cover of a magazine. I'd booked a live band who could play anything from Motown to current hits, arranged a pyrotechnic display that would go off during the cake reveal, and even commissioned a 3-meter cake shaped like a blooming flower. There were dancers and glittering feathers, the kind that looked like they'd stepped straight out of a Rio carnival, weaving through the crowd with practiced smiles and champagne trays. The guest list had ballooned to over 100 people. Friends, business acquaintances, Kate's colleagues, a few influencers she'd met through work, and of course, the dress. I'd ordered it months ago from a designer she'd been fawning over on Instagram. Emerald green silk, hand-stitched with sequins that caught the light every time she moved. When she tried it on that afternoon, she stood in front of the mirror a little longer than usual, running her fingers over the fabric. "You really went all out," she said, her voice soft. I thought it was gratitude I heard. By the time the party hit full swing, the club felt alive. The music was perfect, the drinks were flowing, and Kate was in her element. Laughing, greeting guests, posing for photos with that easy grace that always drew people in. I floated around the room, checking on the band, making sure the staff had what they needed, but my eyes kept drifting back to her. She had that sparkle tonight, the one I hadn't seen in a while. When the time came for speeches, I was ready for my moment. I'd prepared something light but heartfelt. A few jokes, a few sentimental lines about how much she meant to me. But before I could step up, Kate surprised me by taking the mic herself. She stood under the spotlight, glass in hand, the emerald dress shimmering. "I just want to thank everyone for coming," she began, her voice warm and confident. "This year has been a lot, and I'm so grateful to be surrounded by people who care." I smiled, already feeling the emotion of the moment. Then she said it. "I especially want to thank a very special person, Trevor, for helping me through such a difficult year." The name landed in my chest like a weight. Trevor, her colleague. The crowd murmured politely, glasses lifted in casual toasts. But I noticed the way her gaze found him in the crowd. It wasn't just a glance, it lingered, a beat too long. And when he stepped closer, she reached out and brushed his hand with hers. Just a light touch, quick enough to pass as friendly. But it wasn't nothing. I'd seen that look before, not from her, but in other people in moments when they forget the rest of the world is watching. It was the kind of look that carried more history than words could cover. Kate caught herself and quickly broadened her smile, scanning the room as if nothing unusual had happened. She went on to talk about friendship and community, about how important it was to have people to lean on, about love in all its forms. The crowd laughed in the right places, clapped when she raised her glass again. From the outside, it was perfect. Just another gracious birthday speech from the guest of honor. But my mind wasn't on her words anymore. I was thinking about the late nights she'd stayed at the office, the work trips that always seemed to pop up last minute, the times she'd stepped out to take calls and returned with a slightly different expression on her face. Little things I'd brushed off before, because trusting your spouse means not keeping score. I stayed quiet, smiling when people looked my way, raising my glass when Kate caught my eye. She looked radiant, glowing under the club lights. And if anyone else noticed the way her hand had brushed Trevor's, they didn't show it. Maybe they really didn't notice. Maybe I was the only one watching closely enough. When the music started up again, I moved toward her, intending to take her hand and lead her to the dance floor. But Trevor was already there, leaning in to say something that made her laugh. A quick, unguarded laugh, the kind that made her tilt her head just slightly toward him. I didn't interrupt. Instead, I let the band swallow the moment, the bass line vibrating through the floor while my thoughts tangled in ways I didn't want to untangle yet. It was still her night, still her party. And maybe I was imagining it. Maybe that touch, that look, meant nothing. People in happy marriages don't suspect shadows where there are none. That's what I told myself, anyway. But even as I forced myself to rejoin the celebration, to talk with friends and toast to another year, I couldn't stop replaying that tiny gesture in my head. That lingering look. That name. The night went on in a blur of music, champagne, and polite small talk. But in the back of my mind, one thought had already taken root. Something was different. I didn't leave the nightclub so much as drift out of it, like the tide pulling back after a noisy storm. Miami air wrapped around me. Salt, exhaust, and the ghost of Kate's perfume. While the valet kept asking for my ticket and I kept staring at my hands, half expecting them to look different now that something inside me had cracked. When I finally slid into the driver's seat, the steering wheel felt colder than it should have, and the city lights stretched into long, shiny lines on the windshield. On the drive home I kept seeing it. Her eyes finding Trevor in a crowded room, the brief, tender brush of her hand on his, the nanosecond where the rest of us disappeared. It shouldn't have meant anything. People touch. People thank colleagues. But the way my stomach clenched said otherwise. That touch pulled a thread, and suddenly all the little things I'd filed under "don't worry about it" started tugging loose. The first sign was the midnight glow of her phone. We used to fall asleep to dumb sitcom reruns and the dryer thumping a lone sock. Now the room had a lighthouse. Slack pings, calendar alerts, a blue whisper of screen light drifting across her cheekbones. "Deadline?" she'd murmur, rolling away so the glare didn't hit me. I wanted to be the supportive husband who didn't make work harder. So I kissed her shoulder and pretended sleep came easy. Fridays got weird next. Her office had always loved a fire drill, but the emergency sprints stretched later, spilling into dawn. She'd come home smelling like hotel lobby coffee and a complicated perfume that wasn't the one I'd bought for her birthday. It had an expensive, spicy edge, the kind that sticks to hair and fabric and memory. She'd drop her bag, toe her shoes off, and say, "Don't ask, you'll only worry," in that soft voice that makes worry feel like a childish habit. Passwords changed. We'd been idiots about them. Anniversary dates, the dog's name, the kind of security theater couples do because trusting each other is easier than remembering new strings of characters. Then one Tuesday, her laptop woke to a lock screen I didn't recognize. "IT made us change everything," she said, shrugging like she was returning a sweater. The shrug felt rehearsed. I told myself I was imagining it. Her phone started living face down, a little black stone on the kitchen island. If it buzzed, she'd smile with only her eyes and say, "Work," in a tone that left no room for follow-ups. When I walked into a room mid-call, she'd slide into the hallway like a whisper. I'd ask something simple, salmon or tacos. "Can we visit my mom Sunday? Where did you put the spare keys?" And she'd hold up a single finger, 1 minute. Those minutes turned into a language I didn't speak. The locations stopped lining up. Years ago, after a scary night waiting for an Uber that never came, we turned on Find My as a safety net and forgot about it. Slowly, her dot flickered. Battery died. No service. Map unavailable. "Yoga hates phones," she joked. "My instructor confiscates them like confiscating cigarettes." I laughed because jokes are easier than admitting you feel left behind. She started getting midweek manicures. Kate never cared about nails. She was sneakers and chapstick and, "Does this ponytail look like I tried?" Until she wasn't. Now her hands were perfect, cuticles like bullet points, polish matched to the week's pitch deck. She'd hold her latte in a way that made the ring light sparkle on her stories. I wasn't tagged in those anymore, which is not evidence by itself, but it is a feeling. Wardrobe shifts followed. Blazers I hadn't seen before. Dresses with travel creases from stores I couldn't afford even with the coupon I always forgot to use. Sneakers with a tech bro silhouette she swore were ergonomic but looked like jokes told in boardrooms. A second gym bag moved into her trunk. "Spin before sunrise clears my head," she said, kissing the air next to my cheek. Playlists changed. Gone were the sunlit indie tracks we'd built a life to. In came moody, bass-heavy songs that made our speakers sound like they had secrets. Helps me focus, she said, and I said nothing because focus is a virtue, and I wanted to be on the right side of virtue. There was the night she texted from an unknown number. Running late, don't wait up. When I asked, she said her phone had done a weird reset. She laughed, handed me the device like an exhibit, and, almost too casually, deleted a full thread. Spam. The motion looked like muscle memory. I let it pass, telling myself int asterisk Macy isn't surveillance. Another time, her laptop sat open while the kettle screamed. A calendar invite stared back. Strategy sync, 7:30 p.m. Off-site. No office location. Just a dropped pin near the water where the city builds glass boxes for men with cardigans and complicated coffees. We're brainstorming in a quiet spot, she said when I asked. I told her quiet is cheaper at home. She said creativity doesn't punch a clock and kissed my forehead like I was being adorably quaint. Then there was the hotel key, gold, thin, stamped with a logo from a place we'd never stayed. I found it fishing for a dry cleaning receipt. Vendor launch, she said. They gave us rooms to get ready. She smiled so gently it almost worked. For a while it did. I remembered a Tuesday rain that she walked through like the city belonged to her. She came in damp and radiant, humming a song I didn't know, straight to the shower. When she slipped into bed, she turned away. Not coldly, not punishingly, just angled like a question mark. Long day, she whispered, and I counted the space between our breaths until mine matched hers. Trevor started as an anecdote. He's amazing in tough rooms, she said one morning. Stirring cream into coffee, she never drinks black anymore. He sees around corners. I noticed the way her mouth softened on his name. I know that softness. It used to be for me, the private smile launched across a crowded party. The beam that meant I was her safe landing. I told myself I was being uncharitable. People can be grateful without being romantic. We were on the couch one night when her phone lit up. You were right about. Then the words blurred behind that new privacy filter, for focus. She flipped the phone, nuzzled into my shoulder. If it's important, they'll call, she said, and for a breath I believed her. When the credits rolled, she was on the balcony, blue light turning her face into a secret I wasn't invited to share. Even our arguments shifted. We'd always fought like teammates. Ugly, sure, but with an eye on the same scoreboard. Lately, every disagreement felt like I was challenging a brand guideline. You're catastrophizing, she'd say, or, that's not how we show up. We show up. Words she brought home from work the way other people bring swag. Doubt doesn't crash through your door. It fogs the windows. I told myself she was leveling up, that the late nights and the polish and the privacy were just phases of a woman reinventing herself. I built a sturdy narrative out of admiration. She is ambitious. She is in demand. She is allowed to glow. I painted it until it looked like truth. Leaving the nightclub, the paint peeled. The tiny gestures I'd shelved as nothing much came marching back like they'd been practicing in secret. The face-down phone, the disappearing, the hotel key, the quiet spot, the laughter on the balcony, the soft mouth on Trevor's name, and finally, that glass raised to him under the lights while my own name sat untouched on my tongue. I parked outside our building and didn't get out. The engine ticked like a metronome for a song I didn't want to learn. In the windshield, I looked older than I'd felt that morning. I thought about the night on our apartment floor when we promised each other no hiding. Pizza grease on the box, sparkling water because we were broke, vows said without tuxes or witnesses. Tell me the real thing even if it's messy. Somewhere between then and now we'd lost the map. Upstairs, the apartment smelled faintly of burnt sugar, like the afterglow of fireworks. The emerald dress lay over a chair, collapsed in on itself, shimmering in the dark like a tide pool. I loosened my tie and told myself to sleep it off. Tomorrow I'd ask questions, the kind that leave room for grace. Tomorrow I'd give her every chance to prove that my fear was just a story I was telling myself. But when I set my phone on the nightstand, I left it face up. I didn't like who that made me. I also didn't like the silence that followed. A week later, I was supposed to be across town at a lunch meeting, but the client canceled at the last minute. It was one of those strange, quiet gifts the day sometimes hands you. A couple of unexpected hours to yourself. I could have gone to the gym or grabbed a book at the coffee shop down the street, but instead, I decided to head home. It was mid-afternoon, the hour when the apartment complex was usually quiet. Neighbors at work, kids at school, the hum of the pool filter the only background noise. As I parked, I noticed Kate's car already in her spot. She hadn't mentioned working from home. I chalked it up to her maybe needing a break from the office, until I stepped into the hallway and heard music. Not her usual playlists. This was softer, lower, the kind of acoustic background you hear at wine bars. My pulse ticked up a notch. The door was unlocked. When I pushed it open, the smell hit me first. That same spiced, expensive cologne I'd noticed months ago, woven with the faint tang of red wine. In the living room, 2 half-filled glasses sat on the coffee table beside an open bottle of Cabernet. On the couch were Kate and Trevor. They weren't just sitting close. They were tangled, their knees touching, her hand resting on his thigh like it belonged there. His arm was draped casually over the back of the couch, but the way his fingers curled toward her shoulder told me this wasn't just comfort. It was possession. They both froze when they saw me, but neither of them moved apart. For a long second, the only sound was the song in the background. Something with a soft guitar and a voice singing about wanting what you can't have. Kate didn't spring up, didn't offer some nervous laugh about how funny it was that I'd come home early. She just looked at me, her mouth slightly open, like she was working through whether to explain or to challenge me. Trevor leaned forward a little, as if his first instinct was to block her from me, not out of fear but out of ownership. That tiny, almost imperceptible motion burned into me. All the late nights, the vanished location dates, the private smiles, the dress under the nightclub lights. They crashed together into a single, hard certainty. This wasn't speculation anymore. It wasn't just an emotional drift I'd been too proud to name. It was here, in my living room, on my couch, in my wine glasses. Kate spoke first. "Jonathan," she said, soft and measured. Like my name might be a leash she could use to keep me from bolting or exploding. Trevor didn't say anything. I didn't ask them to explain. I didn't shout. My voice, when it came, sounded like it belonged to someone else. "Don't get up," I said, stepping forward only far enough to set my keys on the entry table. "I just need a few things." Kate blinked, but still didn't move away from him. If anything, her shoulders squared. I went to the bedroom, pulled a duffel from the closet and started collecting the essentials. Laptop, a stack of client files, my passport, the small lockbox with documents that mattered. My hands moved calmly, almost methodically, though every heartbeat landed like a punch. From the living room, I heard Kate's voice, low and urgent, though I couldn't make out the words. Trevor murmured something back. I imagined him leaning in, telling her to let me go, that I'd cool down. When I returned to the front hall, my bag slung over my shoulder, I finally looked at her fully. "I'm leaving," I said. "Jonathan, please." I held up a hand. "Don't." For the first time since I'd walked in, she dropped her gaze. I stepped outside, the late afternoon heat pressing against me, and walked straight to my car. I didn't slam the door or peel out of the lot. The engine started smooth and quiet, the way you almost wish it wouldn't when you want the noise to match what's in your chest. At the corner, waiting for the light to change, I thought about every time I told myself I'd know if she ever crossed a line. I had known. I just hadn't wanted to name it until it walked up and sat itself on my couch. By the time I merged onto the freeway toward Fort Lauderdale, the first stage of my plan was already forming. This wasn't going to be a conversation. It wasn't going to be a fight. It was going to be an exit, clean and deliberate. And I wasn't going to give her, or Trevor, any chance to turn it into anything else. I didn't slam the door. I closed it the way you tuck a book shut when you know you're never picking it up again. The hallway smelled like someone's takeout and lemon cleaner. Ordinary, impersonal, safe. I set the duffel in the passenger seat and drove without music. Just the soft tick of the turn signal and the memory of 2 wine glasses on my table. I kept my hands at 10 and 2 like the DMV was grading me, because control had to start somewhere. Fort Lauderdale felt like neutral ground. I called Diego, old friend, the sort of guy who keeps a spare key in a planter because he believes in hospitality like it's a religion. "You good?" he asked after 2 rings. I told him I'd explain later. "Doors open," he said. "I'll be there in an hour. Make yourself at home." He meant well. I didn't want home. I wanted leverage. In his guest room, I opened my laptop and made a list. It wasn't a list of grievances. It was a list of steps. First, money. I logged into the bank and froze the joint checking, the travel card, the line of credit we barely used but that a desperate person might remember at midnight. I moved 2 automatic payments to my personal account, then changed my online banking password to a nonsense string I wouldn't remember without the manager. I requested new cards. I disabled wallet pay on every device with my name on it. I turned off paperless statements for the accounts that mattered and set them to a P.O. box I could open in the morning. There was no anger in the keystrokes, just the relief that comes when a seatbelt clicks. Second, locks. From the app, one scheduled a smart lock code change, disabling the one labeled Kate and the one labeled Cleaner in case she got clever. The lease let me do it unilaterally. I saved screensh *TS. I added a calendar reminder to collect physical keys when the time was right. Not now. Third, records. I uploaded scans of the marriage certificate, the prenup, the last 3 years of taxes, the receipts for the dress and the party, the invoice for a 3-meter cake I suddenly hated. The folder was called Exit. I shared it to a fresh email, one only I knew, then logged out everywhere else. If Kate tried to spin a story, I wanted timestamps that didn't blink. Fourth, communication. I texted a single line, "I'm safe. I need time. Do not come to Diego's. All logistics will go through council." Then I put the phone face down and didn't watch the bubbles appear. Muted her thread. Muted Trevor's number too, just in case he ever found the nerve. Diego came by with empanadas and a 6-pack and the kind of silence that lets a man keep his dignity. When I finally spoke, I kept it clean. Facts, not flaming wreckage. He winced when I said Trevor's name, the way a person does when they learn the villain isn't hypothetical. "You staying as long as you need," he said. "You want a lawyer, I know 2 sharks. I wanted a shark who understood Florida and prenups and the art of not making a spectacle." He gave me a name. I slept badly and woke early, the way you do before a red eye. I laced my shoes and ran until the ocean showed up at the end of the street, a slate sheet under early light. Breathing at the edge of it, I realized I wasn't trying to outpace humiliation. I was rehearsing being alone. On the way back, I bought a cheap notebook. On the first page, I wrote, "No scenes, no speeches, acquire outcomes." The lawyer's office was glass and quiet, downtown. Her name was Marisol, and she shook my hand like we were making a deal rather than begging for a rescue. I told her everything without adjectives. When I finished, she asked, "What do you want in practical terms?" I said, "Clean break, fast timeline, protect the business, minimize exposure, follow the prenup to the letter." "No kids?" she asked. I shook my head. "Good. Then we're solving money, property, and noise." She clicked her pen. "Document her absence and access. Don't stalk, don't snoop. Preserve. We will ask for what we need." We mapped the immediate moves. File the petition to dissolve. Request temporary orders granting me exclusive use of the apartment. Automatic restraining provisions on big financial swings. Notice to the credit bureaus to add fraud alerts. Discovery requests to her employer for travel logs and conference reimbursements. Clean and professional, not salacious. I signed the stack with a hand that didn't shake. Before I left, Marisol slid a simple checklist across the desk. Close shared accounts. Remove her from beneficiary designations. Update will. Route mail to a secure box. Inventory property with photos, what's yours, what's marital, what was gifted solely to you. Change healthcare proxies. Back up your phone. Do not engage in arguments. If she sends an apology manifesto, Marisol said, forward it to me and don't reply. I pictured the emerald dress draped over the chair. I'm done with manifestos, I said. At the post office, I rented a box and wrote the number on the inside cover of my notebook. I drove to the bank and added the fraud alert. I ordered a new number for my phone plan. I moved my two-factor authentication to a hardware key, the kind you have to physically touch. I emailed my assistant, taking a week, reachable for fires only. Then I texted my parents a softer version of the truth and asked them not to drive down. My mom sent a heart. My dad sent one line, "Proud of how you're handling this." Back at Diego's, I paced the living room with my phone, recording a spoken inventory from memory. Watch from Dad, hard drives, camera, cufflinks, documents. I stopped before I named the couch or the art or the plant that refuses to die, because that way lies madness. Instead, I emailed the landlord requesting a supervised walkthrough to retrieve a few things and to change the lock code while a manager filmed. He replied within the hour, "Tomorrow at noon." Order in the middle of chaos felt like oxygen. That night Kate called. I let it ring out. She texted, "Jonathan, please, we need to talk." I forwarded it to Marisol and put the phone in a drawer. If I listened now, emotion would negotiate away structure. On instinct, I removed myself from the shared calendar she maintained for us, then added a blank calendar named after. Sleep came in shards. 3 a.m. I wrote a letter to myself on hotel stationery Diego had tossed in a drawer. This is the plan. You will keep your voice low. You will keep your spine straight. You will not be baited. You will not be cruel for sport. You will do what needs to be done, and then you will begin again. In the morning I bought a second suit. Not because I needed one, but because I wanted to walk into my old life to reclaim my things looking like a man whose future was already under construction. Navy. Subtle herringbone. I kept the tag in my pocket like a talisman. I picked up a small fireproof bag for documents. I bought a new toothbrush because small, clean beginnings matter more than people think. Noon arrived. The landlord unlocked the door while the property manager filmed the walkthrough on a tablet. The apartment smelled like the citrus cleaner the building uses after move-outs. My emerald dress thought slipped through my head and I corrected it. Her dress, not mine. Kate wasn't home. I took my suits, the hard drives, 2 pairs of shoes, the watch from Dad, the cookbook my mother gave us with her handwriting in the margins, the framed photo of my sister at graduation because it was mine before it was ours. I left everything else. No scavenging, no petty tally. On the whiteboard above the desk, in Kate's handwriting, was a to-do list that included confirm Milan flights and Trevor, deck revisions. I took a picture without zooming in. The manager changed the code in front of me and read the new one aloud so it landed in the video. "Only you have this," he said. "If she needs access, she'll go through you or the office." I nodded. I didn't intend to be her corridor anymore. On the way out, a package sat by the door addressed to both of us. I left it. In the elevator mirror, I looked like a man heading to a meeting he planned to win on paper. That was the first moment since the living room that I felt steady. At the bank, I opened a safe deposit box. Inside, I placed the hard drives, the watch, the prenup copy, and the notebook with the first page that had become a promise. I added the fireproof bag with passports and birth certificates. I signed the ledger and closed the steel door with a satisfying click. By late afternoon, Marisol had filed the petition. The case number arrived in my inbox, black letters that looked like coordinates for a map out of a burning city. She called. "You moved quickly," she said. "That will set the tone." I asked if there was anything else. "Yes," she said. "Eat, hydrate, don't make big statements to friends. Facts travel faster than you do. And if you feel like posting cryptic quotes, go for a run instead." I laughed for the first time in 2 days. That evening, I sat on Diego's balcony. The airport's low thunder rolling across the sky. Somewhere beyond it, the Miami nightclub kept spinning, fireworks and glittering dancers, and that moment when Kate raised her glass to her special person. I had wanted to believe it was nothing but theater. Now I was learning a different performance. The quiet kind, where the audience is just you and the outcome is paperwork instead of applause. I wasn't proud. I wasn't broken. I was a man with a plan. I would keep my voice low and my spine straight. I would let the process do the shouting for me. And for the first time in months, that felt like enough to get me through the night. The day the petition number hit my inbox, I printed it and slid it into the fireproof bag like a passport. A line on a docket shouldn't feel like oxygen, but it did. After weeks of reacting, I wanted to build. The first thing I built was a morning. I started running at sunrise, leaving Diego's place before the city remembered to be loud. The beach path was a ribbon of cool air and long shadows, gulls heckling the ocean, joggers in neon shoes passing like metronomes. I ran slow at first, counting breaths, for in, for out, until my head emptied enough for larger thoughts. On the third day, a stranger high-fived me and said, "You're early. That's the trick." I taped those words inside my skull. At work, I took the projects no one wanted, the messy ones that required patience and a whiteboard the size of a wall. I stayed in rooms where decisions got made and left before conversations turned into gossip. When people asked how I was doing, I said, "Focused." It wasn't bravado. Focus was the raft I chose to build instead of a story about being wronged. The apartment became a workshop. Marisol's motion gave me keys, but walking into the space still felt like stepping into a photograph of my old life. So I started erasing shadows with small, practical acts. I boxed the linen we'd bought together and donated it. I repainted a wall a color the store called sea glass, which sounds precious until you see sun hit it at 9 a.m. and the room unclenches. I swapped the heavy couch for one that didn't remember how we used to sit. I put the bed against a different wall and moved the nightstand to the other side, like I was giving sleep a fresh map. I threw out the chipped wine glasses. I bought 2 short tumblers that felt honest in the hand. CrossFit wasn't my brand, but Diego swore by the 6 a.m. class. On day 1, a coach explained deadlifts like he was teaching me to pick up the earth. No mirrors, just chalk, breath, and people cheering for strangers. I wasn't trying to punish myself. I was learning the physics of carrying weight without letting it own my posture. A month in, I could feel the exact moment a barbell becomes light because you've lined up correctly. There's a metaphor there. I tried not to say it out loud. On Saturdays, I let the ocean knock me around. Surfing looks like swagger on a postcard. In practice, it's humility with a leash. I learned to read wind, wait on the outside, and accept that half your job is paddling into nothing so you're not late when the right thing finally rises. Every time I stood up, even for a second, the cheering in my chest was louder than the break. Wipeouts became part of the evidence that I was the kind of man who tries again without an audience. Food got simpler. Eggs, fruit, coffee I weighed on a little scale like I was performing a ceremony. I cut back on the open bar that used to tag along with networking. I slept better. My shoulders dropped. The mirror stopped asking questions. The notebook I'd bought on that first hard night became a map. I kept 2 columns. Keep and learn. Under keep I wrote, honesty, quiet, early miles, work worth doing, friends who show up with empanadas. Under learn I wrote, detachment, boundaries, role of anger, fuel, not steering wheel, curiosity without surveillance, how to accept praise without auditioning for it. Then came Liam and Nate, 2 young guys with a deck about a coffee shop chain that treated community like a product feature instead of an accident. They'd built one location as a proof of concept. Good beans, better lines of sight, baristas paid enough to stay, and wanted to grow without acting like growth was the point. Someone who knew someone said, "Talk to Jonathan." We met at their shop on a Wednesday. Sun through big windows, a kid doing calculus at the corner table, a woman in scrubs writing in a journal with a purple pen. Liam did most of the talking, all elbows and enthusiasm. Nate was the quieter one, the kind of quiet that listens for what you actually mean. I told them I liked the coffee and the cash flow projections, but what sold me was the hiring plan taped to the back of their binder. Pay people real. Train like you mean it. Schedule like they have families. Close on holidays. Don't post values you won't budget for. I can write a check, I said, but I'm better at systems than at latte art. That's exactly what we need, Nate said. Money is gas. Systems are the engine. We shook hands. I became an investor and a mentor, 2 words that can be obnoxious if you wear them like a cape. I tried to be an air traffic controller instead, seeing patterns, preventing collisions, encouraging good landings. We set up operating rhythms. Monday metrics, Wednesday walkthroughs, monthly training campfires, where line staff explained what actually worked. When a supplier tried to squeeze us, Liam wanted to fight. I taught him how to let the numbers do the punching. It felt good to build something that wasn't about me. The more I contributed, the less my story needed to be told in rooms that didn't deserve it. I still had nights where memory flared, the couch, the wine glasses, the music that made everything small. But those flashes got shorter, like lightning moving offshore. I started writing again, not about betrayal but about course correction. A blog, private at first, then public under a title that arrived on a run, Keys to Freedom. Miami jokes aside, the name stuck because recovery felt like unlocking doors I'd closed on myself long before Kate ever turned a knob. I wrote about boundaries that didn't need an audience, about choosing strength without choosing hardness, about how forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation and sometimes looks like finally watering your own plants. People found it. Not a swarm, just a steady trickle of men and women who recognized the shape of the hole I'd stepped around and then out of. They wrote back with their own maps. I answered what I could, careful not to become a preacher in a gym towel. The rule I wrote at the top of the site: this is not revenge. This is maintenance. By the second month, my lawyer's email subject lines sounded like progress instead of alarm. Temporary orders held. Discovery came back clean where it needed to be clean and messy where it needed to be honest. I didn't Google Kate. I didn't ask mutual friends for updates. When I caught myself drafting clever speeches in the shower, I turned off the water and did 10 slow squats. Drama feeds on imaginary audiences. My life was busy elsewhere. One night after a long day at the shop, Liam asked how I knew we were ready to open the second location. When the first place runs without you for a week, I said. He squinted. So success is you being unnecessary? I laughed. Exactly. Freedom is redundancy. On my birthday, I woke before the alarm and ran farther than I'd planned. The sunrise came in like a quiet admission that the world wasn't punishing me. It was just turning, same as ever. Back home, I made pancakes in a new SK*let and didn't think about who wasn't at the table. Diego stopped by with a silly candle shaped like a tiny surfboard. We ate on the balcony, watching planes trace invisible highways. I didn't make a wish. I made coffee. In the afternoon, I stood by the sea glass wall and realized the apartment finally smelled like me. Citrus cleaner, ground beans, a hint of ocean left on a towel. No ghosts. The judge still had work to do, papers still needed signatures, but the center of gravity had shifted. What had started as survival had become practice, and practice had become a life. I don't know if transformation is the right word. It suggests fire and ashes and a rebirth that makes